This trunk wiring harness is not going to solve the issues on project E36. Huh? So then why am I installing it? Basically, I'm keeping my expectations extremely low so that if it does happen to solve the crazy intermittent electrical issues that I've been having on this car, then we can be pleasantly surprised instead of extremely disappointed. Let me show you what we're dealing with. This harness repair kit comes as a direct replacement to your existing trunk lid wiring harness. And the cool thing is it comes with new grommets, new sheathing for the exposed part that runs through the trunk hinge, terminated plugs for all of the different things like license plate lights, the trunk latch in the actual trunk lid. These 3 wires looks like they are pinned and ready to be inserted into a plug. And then on the other end, we have bare wires. So we will be cutting into the existing trunk harness. But this is a BMW genuine part for a BMW genuine issue. I took this car for an inspection in order to get it registered. And in order for it to pass, the airbag light needs to turn on to prove that the car is working. But when I turn the car on, we get nothing. Should be right there. And the main thing that tipped me off to these issues from the start is that when I press the brake pedal, nothing happens except for this check control light. And when I check the onboard computer, I know you can't see it, but it says brake light circuit. And now you can see after I press the brake pedal and get that issue, then our fuel gauge all of a sudden thinks that we're empty. This car is currently an unregistered brick, so I know for a fact that I filled it up very recently and it is not empty. And what do you know, while we're talking about it, it went back to 7/8 tank. So naturally with the brake lights out, we came around to the back of the trunk, and this is the current state of what we're working with. This is a well-documented issue with the E36s. There's a black sheath on the trunk wiring harness that runs from this opening and this grommet up along this hinge into the actual trunk lid itself, which powers the power lock release, the license plate lights, and maybe a couple other things. Over time, this is a 20-plus-year-old car. This wiring gets brittle and breaks from constantly being opened and shut. That broken wiring can throw the entire car out of whack, especially because the instrument cluster and the brake lights, they're actually on the same fuse. Therefore, issues in one place can lead to issues across the entire car. So our first temporary fix got the entire car working briefly. That meant this third brake light worked, both side brake lights or tail lights worked, power locks worked, and all the gauges in the cluster worked. And the airbag light even popped on right before and after I failed my inspection. We popped out each of these rivets. Honestly, I just destroyed them because they're apparently super cheap to replace. It was really hard to get them out regularly. We've exposed the harness running through that hole. So right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut it very close to here, unravel it a bit, pull out the battery, splice everything in, and then have zero expectations that it's going to fix anything. And naturally, as we're working, we find more gifts that this car just keeps giving with this destroyed rear crash bar. Not a huge deal, but it just means that the rear trunk area is probably not perfectly aligned, which could be an issue in the future. That's a problem for another day. I've also heard that the brake light circuits themselves can cause issues. So I was already planning on doing a full lighting switch up on this car, so I ordered new brake lights that I'm going to be swapping in as well. So basically we know that the old weird wiring setup behind them is fresh and should not be causing any issues. And we're trying to create more space. I just removed this gas door popper, which is basically 2 Phillips head screws in order to actually just get this thing out that's actually stuck. You can't remove it basically until you undo this, and then you can slip this off. And this is actually broken too. Go figure, so that's just one more thing to replace. Every time I remove something from this trunk, I find something else that's sketchy. So in this case, I'm just getting this broken part of the plastic covering out. Yeah, that's glass. And most importantly, now we can see there's some sketchy wiring going on, which we already knew about, but we see more of it. This wire is very thick gauge. It runs somewhere up into this box, which I'm assuming is an amplifier. Runs all the way down here. And terminates into nothing. But one of the main things I wanted to do was to check the top of my strut towers and make sure that there's no issues with those. So let's see if we can pull this insulation back. Alright, and that looks like there's no cracking or rust or anything, which is a great sign. I get the feeling that this car wasn't driven too hard, maybe? Just was abused in other ways. So next up, we get to trace that random cut black wire, which I'm assuming went to some kind of sound system, and do our actual harness repair. I'm also really curious what this thing is. Just kind of just hanging there. All right, let's go ahead and disconnect the battery. Make sure we're not getting any unwanted connections. So with our new harness fed through, and we kind of match it up. So we're gonna cut the shortest ones first and leave a little bit of room for the longer ones. So we'll probably cut right about here. Here's where we're splicing in, and here's our new harness. Now we need to decipher what goes where. There are about 16 different cables on our new repair harness, but there are only 10 cables on our OEM harness. I'm assuming that's just because there were different options available on the cars. In fact, if you look at the repair harness, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different plugs, not including 3 pins that could be put into a plug. And I'm assuming that's what these staggered lengths are on a repair harness. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the OEM harness from all of its plugs up here so we can actually pull it out, and then we're going to match the cables to the actual available wires and make sure we're using the correct ones. So we started pulling these out as they go, these two, and we're remembering what the colors are. Hard to see, but that is a trunk latch actuator, I believe. And it looks like this last bundle right here goes to the license plate lights. So we're going to get a Phillips head and pull that off. The license plate lights, so it looks like I just have to pull up from where this little bump is, and then it exposes the wire right there. And so obviously we can see one of these harnesses is a little longer than the other side. That should make it easy to determine what to do. And now we pull it all out. All right, so here's what we learned. This is the old harness. There are 5 plugs on the old harness. These 2 go to the trunk lock. And this one, find it hard to believe that this is how they would do it from factory, but I mean, I see no reason why not. This looks like just an unused plug. I'll unwrap it really quick. It looks like it has melted the housing. That is super weird and sketchy, and I have no idea why that might be. There's 10 wires that correspond to these 5 plugs. On our new setup, we have 2 trunk light wires. Those are solid. Our seemingly unused wire in much better condition. We have these 3 unpinned wires. These actually, I think, are going to have to be repinned into this. I need to figure out how to depin this plug and swap these into it without destroying it. And then we have our other trunk lock plug. So everything that is exposed up here is exactly what we need. The question is, how do we find the right ones on the other end of the harness since we have extra? So I'm thinking based on lengths we'll be able to tell which is which. So I'm gonna grab some tape. By referencing the number of wires, their lengths, and the colors on the old harness, I'm able to create tape bundles on the new one that correspond to each plug. All right, so now we're gonna take our multimeter and set it to continuity mode so we can check our work and make sure that the wires that we think we have on the plug are what are actually going to be connected back to the body harness. For instance, you have this brown wire next to the gray and black. Stick our probe into that plug, then come to this end and probe the brown wires until we're sure we have the right ones in our bundle before we actually attach it back to the harness. All right, it's the next day. Next step, we need to strip all the wires on the existing trunk harness. We need to pick up the proper shaped crimping tool for these U-channel splice connectors. This insulated kind will not work. I also learned that this burnt out plug on the original harness goes to something that's missing right here, which is a trunk close, open close sensor. So that basically, lets the car know if the trunk is actually fully shut. but I'm gonna head to AutoZone, pick up that crimping tool, and we'll be right back. The great thing about having a broken old part is that you can destroy it in the process of learning how it works, how it goes apart, and how it goes back together. Unfortunately, I need to keep this connector intact so I can swap it over to the exposed pins on the new harness. In this case, I'm able to use a small metal hose pick to pop the plastic protective cover off the connector, then press down on the retaining clips for each pin and slide them out of their housing. But with those looking good, I'm adding the supplied crimps to the body side of the new harness. Now to install our heat shrink, I'm going to put it onto the body harness first. Then we're going to attach each wire, crimp the other side, and then we're going to test everything before we finalize and actually heat up our heat shrink. All right, and this is what we have so far. We're not done yet, but we are at the phase where we can actually test everything out. So I'm gonna go ahead and run this back in through here and rewire the 4 plugs that we have available in the trunk, the 2 on the lock actuator, and the 2 license plate lights. Then we'll reconnect the battery and expect everything to work exactly how it did before I did this process. Now we reconnect the battery. All right, nothing yet. Making sure that nothing over here is exposed to short. I swapped out the old taillights with our new Euro style taillights in hopes that maybe contacts or something in these taillights was part of our problem. And let's just go to the on position. I don't think it fixed our problem.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
And I guess we hit the brake pedal. Still have our issue. I'm not disappointed. We knew this probably wouldn't solve the issue, but regardless, it's now day 3. We know that we have a solid wiring harness going into the trunk. The trunk lights work, running lights on our tail lights work, but our other issues still remain. So all we can do right now is we'll grab our heat gun, we will finish heat shrinking the splices and continue to troubleshoot our issues. But as of right now, we can write off our trunk harness as no longer being the cause of our brake light issues. So with that, hope you guys learned something. This particular fix on the E36 can solve a bunch of some other issues that you're having, and it's helpful to just know how to do that in general. So I hope that helped. I'm gonna dive back into the next issue that I think would be causing my problems, which is the check control module. So stay tuned for some more info on that. I will get this thing running, registered, and get to actually turning it, like restoring it, turning it into, you know, the vision I have in my head. So if you guys want to see that journey, learn along with me, don't forget to like, hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so you never miss an upload. TikTok and Instagram at Chris Gaines. I post tons of updates there all the time. And I know the struggle is real, but I can see the vision. That's the important thing. Just with those clear tails already, the car is already so close. I think we'll get there, we'll get there. This is part of it, guys. If you want a salvage car, you want to find a cheap car and restore, you got to be willing to deal with the issues that come with it. So, and especially at times like this, you got to keep in mind, onwards and upwards, guys. Onwards and upwards.